Hi there. Welcome to Ready to Launch, but where to and how to, tips and tools to get that great gig or into grad school. My name is Dr. Chris Stout. I am class of 1981, School of Science, Department of Psychology, bachelor's degree, and I'm tickled to be able to be here and talk to you about a variety of these things today. What I'm going to talk about has been applied to me, and I hope these things will be of help to you. My approach has always been to be more integrative and diverse rather than angular or laser focused. And I'd also love to tell you that what I've done has been the result of just a finely articulated and executed plan, but it's not. It sort of reminds me of what I'd heard about flying an airplane. You can fly from point A to point B, but in 90% of the time you're off course, either vertically or horizontally, and you're always having to make mid-course corrections. And that's what I felt like I've kind of done with my career. So we'll get more into that and talk more about that. I feel like my experiences that I've had at IUPUI have really been helpful to prepare me for what's been known as a portfolio career that I've written about, others have written about, and we'll have some links at the end of this that you can learn more about what a portfolio career is about in general, but I'll start with mine. So kind of way back when, I was on faculty, full clinical professor at the College of Medicine in the Department of Psychiatry, and then started to work with Tim Erickson, who was the residency director in the Department of Emergency Medicine, as they were forming their Center for Global Health. And that's really kind of been what I've leaned into most directly and most excitingly, and what we'll talk about in today's lecture about opportunities for you in the humanitarian space as well. Before that, was on faculty at the Feinberg School of Medicine at Northwestern University. And in those days, we really were looking at mental health and outcomes. It was so long ago in the 80s where people weren't really looking at outcomes in mental health or behavioral health or psychiatry, psychology. And that was one of the things that we did in particular. I worked with Ken Howard and Michael O'Mahony and John Lyons there at the university, and really enjoyed that, did a lot of that in my own clinical practice, in the hospital and medical settings that I was working in as well. It all was a very good fit. Parallel to that, I got involved with the TED conferences and worked with the original founder, Richard Saul Wurman, went to a number of those conferences and talks. And then he and I wound up doing, not just he and I, but I and a number of others worked with Richard to do a project called Understanding USA, which led to a book. And it really kind of started to bring in a lot of the outcome studies that I had done and people having a better understanding of mental health outcomes and how that worked. That then is at TED conferences. I met Dean Kamen. Dean Kamen was quite the inventor. He invented the Segway, he invented this, he invented one of the world's, I think, first portable dialysis machines, and got really kind of into the mechanical techie part of technology. He invited me to be part of his first robotics competitions as a judge, and just I very much enjoyed that, and I got to scratch a lot of the itches that I had and curiosities about being able to see what technology could bring to healthcare, to mental health care in particular. Um, when I first started in my practice, I was always concerned that I might misdiagnose someone, and I really saw the opportunity for technology and computers to come together to help spur outcomes and make doing outcome studies a little bit easier. The advent of electronic medical records was right around that time as well. But in my concern about technology, I was always worried that I was going to misdiagnose someone. So I put together a very basic, not at all anything that would even look like artificial intelligence or an algorithm, but kind of a process to be able to use personal computer software, off the shelf kinds of stuff back then. I think it was Ashton Tate, the DB3, Database 3 Plus, to be able to put together a program to do that. And it worked. And I found that it really wasn't that difficult to put that together. So I started doing some lecturing and doing some writing on how to be able to do that. That then led to the late 90s and the .com. And then so technology kind of took over in that area, in those areas, to look at the impact of technology kind of on the web as things were starting to develop in the mid and late 90s. And parallel to that, we'll talk about, I got involved with Flying Doctors of America and really started to have an interest in doing humanitarian work, global health work, and that led to the foundation of what became the Center for Global Initiatives, a 501c3 nonprofit, again, that we'll do a deeper dive in. And again, kind of marrying these kinds of things with technology, I actually wrote an article that was in IEEE's publication around looking at technology and issues of security and safety. Then maybe going full circle, closing that loop with looking at outcomes, doing a lot of work back, this was at the College of Medicine at University of Illinois, with evidence-based practice. And you couldn't really develop an evidence base or treatment guidelines without first having outcome studies to see what works well with what kind of condition and what kind of individual and what kind of setting. And it was really kind of a nice way to round out all those things and then move on with some of the other activities and things that we'll talk about today. All of these things really led to a lot of publications. I really enjoy writing. I enjoy reviewing. I enjoy editing. Oftentimes, I would take articles and build those out, do presentations on them, and then try and see if I could pitch those to publishers. And that's exactly what happened with this, the integration of psychological principles in policy development. I, up to that time, had done a lot of presentations, but mostly just to psychological audiences, people, my own tribe, so to speak, people that kind of knew the parlance and knew some of the things that I was talking about. And this was really kind of a step outside of my comfort zone, one of the first of many. I gave a talk in Cairo, hence the background shot there. And that talk was really, for the first time, to a diverse group of audience members. It was diverse in terms of culture. It was diverse in terms of linguistic abilities. It was diverse in terms of, it wasn't a psychology audience. There might have been some psychologists in the audience, but it was policy makers. It was political folks. It was people looking at social structures. It was anthropologists, cultural anthropologists, a very diverse mix of folks. And the reason that I wanted to present there was that I had some nascent ideas at the time that I felt that psychology could bring some benefit and some power to the fore with regard to policy and policy development. I was just starting to get involved in federal advocacy activities with the APA and going to the Hill in Washington every year to push for patient rights and legislative changes at a federal level. I had done similar kinds of things through the Illinois Psychological Association and our state psych association's legislative committee. So this was kind of, I had built that as a foundation and thought, okay, I'm going to stick my toe into this water. And it was quite helpful, very illuminating, got a lot of good critical feedback and gave me a lot of other ideas that were then helpful and formative to put together what eventually came into being with this book. And this book I edited. I wrote about, I think, 3 or 4 of the chapters myself, but then also called into some of the colleagues that I had met at this conference and said, hey, here's what I'm doing. Put together this book. They were very generous with their time and their intelligence and their expertise, and were able to create this book. That then led into a cascade of events. I had the opportunity with that publisher, that was with Prager, that I was also interested at the time to get involved with the United Nations. I'd been getting into this policy kind of thing, and the APA, through originally way back when in the late 90s, it was through Division 9, SPICY. And then later, the APA itself as an organization got NGO status with the United Nations. So during that time, I was able to go to New York, I went every month, which was kind of a rare thing. Usually prior to that time, everybody that had been involved with it had done it because they were there in the New York metropolitan area. My mentor was Korana Korodudu. Some of you may know or know of her. She was at Rowan University at the time, and she really kind of helped guide me through that process. I worked on something called the Copenhagen Declaration, and looking at how psychology plays a role in that with sustainable development vis-a-vis mental health and substance abuse. Kind of fast forwarding and kind of a neat, again, closing of the loop. I went back, I got an invitation to come back in 2018. I had a very bad hair day for that ID, but one of the neat things about this was that I was also able to extend that invitation to include my daughter. It was also part of the focus in 2018, the variety of different kinds of things, but the one that I was a part of, that I was able to bring my daughter and get credentials for her to be able to participate in this, was looking at women's issues and women's leadership at the United Nations and also developmentally nationally. That then segued into an introduction to someone who's become a dear friend, Harvey Langholtz. Harvey wrote this book, The Psychology of Peacekeeping. He had worked at the United Nations. He's a social psychologist on faculty at College of William and Mary, has done a lot of stuff. I could give a whole lecture just on his career, which is amazing. I recommend looking him up. I can answer questions about him in the Q&A, but the focus that he had was the aspects of the United Nations and peacekeeping efforts. Our publisher put us together. We immediately became great friends, and then he and I collaborated and put together this book that we co-edited and co-authored called The Psychology of Diplomacy. So while he worked there, it was under Madeleine Albright. She was Secretary of State, and he had a number of contacts and connections that kind of could lean into a lot of the diplomatic UN aspects. And then I had built up a nice cadre of colleagues there as well around the whole more psychology, NGO aspects, and where psychologists can play a role. So all these kinds of things are neat, formative things. And I just want to point them out in the sense of being open to other kinds of areas. My training was not social psychology or political psychology, but kind of got into that by virtue of starting in clinical psychology. And this aspect too really does kind of go hand in hand. It was a volunteer effort there at the United Nations. Any of you that are interested, I think it's gone back to being more New York based, but you can certainly apply for these positions. I do believe they're all postdoctoral now, but they're really amazing kinds of opportunities to do amazing kinds of work and network. I had presentations from it, a couple of publications. I got to present at the General Assembly. It was really kind of a heady time if that's something that you have interest in. But it also sort of got me on this career path vis-a-vis volunteering to be what I've obviously here in LinkedIn and many other places referred to as being an accidental humanitarian. And a lot of the work I'm going to talk about in terms of jobs will be in this humanitarian space, as long as my voice holds out. As I had mentioned, kind of around that same time of being involved with the United Nations, maybe where my head was at was I got involved. I liked the academic part. I liked the research part. I liked the outcomes part, but I really wanted to also have more of a, pardon me, an experience with actually boots on the ground, as they say. Maybe a little bit more skin in the game and volunteering and getting active in country in these areas and doing these kinds of things. So I volunteered to go to Ha Long Bay. This is where this shot is here in Vietnam. It's in the Gulf of Tonkin, where the Vietnamese US-Vietnam War started. This is us on one of our commutes. You can see one of the docs here taking a picture in her scrubs. And we worked in a formerly built by the French hospital. It was over 100 years old at the time we were there. It had no electricity. It had no running water. It had no glass in the windows. And my work clinically as a psychologist has been as a child and family therapist. So I worked with the pediatricians and, played with the kids and actually, helped organize the formulary for the pharmacy and just kind of did whatever needed to get done. I brought in clean water. Someone say, go grab these meds. I went and grabbed those meds and did an accounting of it and just really had an amazingly impactful and wonderful experience with the children there and with their parents and with that kind of experience. And going through that and going and doing that kind of a thing then led on to developing my own 501c3. I did a lot of work in the nonprofit area, but didn't really have a specific organization or have the IRS designation in the United States as being a 501c3. So I worked with a number of colleagues and friends, attorneys and whatnot, and we put it together, developed a board, submitted our application to the IRS, got it accepted, and basically have been kind of doing that ever since. Did it unofficially without a 501c3, which people can do. You can always volunteer and do different kinds of things to be helpful to others, but really wanted to have this status, which opened up a lot of doors for us, mostly on online kinds of things, being able to, someone making a donation could actually make it a tax-deductible donation. Once you're a formalized and legitimate 501c3, it gets you into a variety of other websites. I'm trying to think. We've been rated as a top-ranked global health nonprofit, GuideStar, Charity Navigator, et cetera, those kinds of things. So if you're interested in this, do take a look at centerforglobalinitiatives.org. We do a lot of, we have a ton of free things on there, a ton of lectures, all sorts of materials, a fellowship program, et cetera. We keep growing and expanding. And again, talk for another day. I can tell you more about that. So one of the things then that's been kind of fun for the last 4 years, we developed a podcast also to kind of highlight people, interesting people doing interesting things. Most all of them have a overlap in the humanitarian space. It's just really kind of a neat, diverse who's who. We're on a variety of platforms. We're on Vimeo. We're also on YouTube. We have a specific channel there that I'll have links in these lecture notes as well. We're on a variety of different kinds of platforms. So if you're interested in listening to those, we drop once a month, and it's called Living a Life in Full. And we're on, I think, just about every single platform that's imaginable out there. So it really has kind of been a long, strange trip, as they say, but quite enjoyable, quite diverse, and not quite done yet. So let's talk about more specific things to psychology. Again, everything that I just talked about really was born out of coming from psychology. There are a lot of things that you can do with any kind of degree in psychology, from experimental to clinical to social to political to, you name it. There's a diverse group of divisions within the American Psychological Association. If you're more scientifically oriented, you can focus with the American Psychological Society, et cetera. I mean, it's just really quite blue sky that way. Back in probably the mid 70s, this article was published by Richards and Gottfriedson, and I just literally used this table as sort of a way to kind of say, what are the kinds of things that I want to do in my career as a psychologist? And at this point, kind of looking back 35-ish years or so, I was able to, check off a lot of these. This became sort of my professional bucket list in a way. And I recommend if you like these kinds of things, or interested in these kinds of things, do develop your own. I've developed mine. And it's been a helpful guide to kind of, set things up and tee things up. It's also been kind of fun then to look back and when I've had some difficult times or feeling like I can't get anything done, or, it's imposter syndrome, to be able to look back and say, okay, well, here's some things that I was able to do, and to feel, proud of that kind of work and proud of that contribution as a psychologist. So let's maybe shift out of this and talk about you. What do you want to do with your psychology degree? And again, I would say there might be a variety of things that you can do. So, but at least, start off in a certain kind of direction. What's that pathway going to be? So for me, as you kind of noticed, excuse me, I've really seen ways of psychology to be involved in areas to be able to make a difference. I mean, I really feel that psychology is a learned profession, and it offers such a wonderfully diverse set of career options that you can just get into and do deeply and do that one, or you can do two, or you can do three. You'll be, most all psychology has, as undergrad and graduate, a basis in science. Then you can back out of it, like I did, of being a little bit more applied clinically, or even just in the humanitarian space, which has been kind of, I guess, kind of my go-to. Pardon me, I apologize for my voice. It's really also continued to be a platform for contemporary times and continuing evolution and adaptation and augmentation to working with, from individuals to families to systems to writing to books, to being able to get education out there in a variety of different kinds of ways. So, and again, for me, all these diverse kinds of things is what's led to that concept of a portfolio career. So let's just, this is kind of quasi general, but a little bit more specific. So if you want to get involved in things, be it volunteer or be it employment or jobs, some of these things might happen with an undergraduate degree, maybe a master's, maybe a doctorate. So, please do kick the tires and check these things out. But this is really just kind of a sampler of things to think about. So they can be general. They can be very specific. We've actually worked with fistula projects and things, so they can be, maybe you're interested in more specific kinds of things. They can be academic. Again, my friend and colleague, Tim Erickson, was recruited from the College of Medicine at UIC to Harvard, to the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative. So they can be more academically based. This is probably, I would say, even maybe a hybrid, because they do things, but they very much assess the impact and the outcomes there. They can be maybe just specifically limited in the field. Again, this is another project that I was on. This was in Bolivia. We worked at 3 different prisons. I got dysentery. It was quite an experience, but this was with flying doctors as well. Or they can be for advocacy. As I mentioned, I worked, advocacy can be at the United Nations. I worked at state level advocacy for patient rights in Illinois. I worked at federal level advocacy kinds of things as a federal advocacy coordinator through the American Psychological Association, or they can be specific to this, for example, Polaris, looking at issues of human trafficking. So, think about what are some of the areas that you have interests in, and those might be at least ways to get a direction to start to winnow down and kind of see what's out there. And again, of course, this is me. They can be a combination. We developed, and I have links for this if you want to learn more about it, what we call the Consortium for Humanitarian Intervention, where we really brought together advocacy and policy with academics, with teaching, with educating people, psychologists in particular in these areas, also medical students, et cetera, and a collaborative within universities, NGOs, international, US-based, et cetera. So they can certainly, be a combination, and you can certainly go and build your own as well. The KROC Institute, I just love this. It's great eye candy, but the KROC Institute also just kind of uses this as a little wheel of fortune way to think about jobs and positions of all these different kinds of areas. So if you're interested in justice and healing, or structural and institutional change, or violence prevention, conflict response, and conflict resolution, these are kind of the subtopical areas that you can start to take a look at. And, they're not limited to psychology. They're not specific to psychology, but I would argue that psychologists and people with undergrad psychology degrees very much would find these as good fits, and people that run these organizations would be benefited with people like you as being their staff. Another great resource is Idealist. At the latest count, there's over 133,000 different organizations listed in Idealist. They've got a variety of jobs and internship programs, and now they've also started to list graduate programs. So if you're an undergrad and this is an area that you want to take a look at, you can also use this as a tool to research possible graduate programs. And then they also have a specific area of nonprofit careers in their career resources section. So as you start to scratch the surface of these kinds of areas, you find that there's really an abundance. And hopefully through this lecture, there's many more. I can't give all day lecture on all these kinds of things, but there's many more in these areas that I think that you would find beneficial and of interest. There's also the Alliance for Conflict Transformation. They have an entire great book on this. This is a link to the PDF down here, but they've got over 60 organizations, and just also kind of a how-to. I'll reference back to this about resumes in just a second. There's sustainability.com. They've got a career guide for looking at sustainability and working within corporations that have kind of leaned into social responsibility, if that's an area of interest and importance to you as well. If you're more interested in the global health side of things, psychology is a part of this in a variety of different kinds of ways, mental health kinds of issues, providing services, but then also to look at outcomes. Maybe you're not interested in clinical application, but maybe you're interested in evaluating kinds of things and putting together programs and education and whatnot. So take a look there too. They've got a variety of different kinds of cool things. Of course, do take a look at, memberships and things. I don't think it's ever less expensive to be in the APA or probably your state association, as like with APAGs for graduate students, or obviously the psychology, psychi, et cetera, to be involved in. But when you're in APA, and I don't know, some of these things might just be available to anyone coming to the website. I don't know if these are password protected members only stuff, but there's virtual job fairs. I mean, here's an example, looking at a variety of different kinds of areas and applied, looking at academic positions, et cetera. So there's a variety of different kinds of virtual job fairs that you can check out and see what's what. And they also have a number of just great webinars and things that are free. So this is an example of a recent one, playing the long game and becoming a recognized expert, which I think would be a great opportunity for undergraduate and graduate students and anyone, professionals as well, to take a look at. So get on those mailing lists. I get these in my inbox whenever they're coming out, and I find them as just really great resources. I was also, well, I guess I am still, but used to be much more involved with the American Psychological Association's Office of International Affairs. I was part of SERP, the Committee on International Relations in Psychology. I did a 3-year stint there with that, and it was great. But they also have a number of wonderful resources. They have grant opportunities. I was in my younger years, was given earned two grants to be able to offset costs to give a talk at international conferences. I was part of a co-author to a book that's freely downloadable as a PDF from there. So there's just a ton of resources there that I would highly recommend. And similar to that, and often in collaboration with Office of International Affairs, is Division 52 of the APA. It's the Division of International Psychology. I've also been very active with them. I highly recommend, if you're part of APA, join Division 52. They've got great publications. They have job postings, et cetera, education kinds of things. It's a good way to kind of start to get to know other people that are working in the international space, be it graduate students or professors, or just kind of what's going on research-wise, or organizations as well. Great group of people. Just can't recommend it more highly. And then 80,000 hours. This is actually a new one to me. I just sort of stumbled upon them within the last, month, actually, I think. And their focus it's based on 80,000 hours. It's kind of their back of the napkin math of how long you'll be in your job. They're based out of the UK. But check them out. They're very global in scope. They will, if you're on their mailing list, they will send you updates of positions that are open, and it's just really kind of a neat website as well too. So I highly recommend them. I myself have just scratched the surface and enjoying everything that I'm seeing there. It's very impressive. And then finally, too, our center has a presence on Facebook. We have a Facebook group. Please come join us. And we post a variety of different kinds of things there, latest activities and stuff, global health things. If there's scholarships, if there's job positions, whatever. So, if you're on Facebook, take a look there too. So let's shift and maybe segues into ways to maximize your potential to getting whatever that next gig might be. We've talked about ways to look at what those positions are, where to find those positions, places to be able to network. And then those are all the fun, cool, exciting parts. But then this becomes maybe a bit of a challenge. It's competitive out there. And the challenge is that you're very competitive. That's not the challenge, but you are, in competition with a variety of other people that are just as well capable, just as smart as you are, done just as many things as you have just as good a GPA as you've had. So how is it that you can distinguish yourself amongst such a deep bench of other people of being job applicants? What are the kinds of things that you can do to be able to stand out and think about those things of what do I already have, or what are some of the things that I could possibly do in the future to tee myself up for that while I'm still in undergrad, or once I'm in graduate school, or to get into graduate school once I'm out of graduate school. And Scott Adams, that name may sound familiar. He does the comic strip Dilbert, and he basically said that if you want to be extraordinary, there's two ways to do it. One is just become the Michael Jordan of basketball, or to do whatever it is that that's the great thing, and you have to have the talent, you have to put in the time, etc. Not all of us have that. I will never be a Michael Jordan. I will never be a B.F. Skinner, et cetera, et cetera. But maybe another thing to think about, or I think maybe a more generalizable and applicable way, is to try and become good at the top two things, or not to be good in two or more things, and to combine those in a clever kind of way. So for him, he said, I'm not going to be the world's best cartoonist. I'm not going to be the world's best business leader. I'm not going to be the world's most, funny person, doing stand-up or comedy writer. But when he combined all those, he was able to do something very unique and create the very successful Dilbert. But his key is the fact that there's no two people that are alike, that you may have your own certain set of skills, like Liam Neeson, and be able to provide a very rare value proposition. I think those are the kinds of things that can then be helpful for you to distinguish yourself. So think about what your two or three different unique kinds of things are. So you combine these and you get the Batman. So some of the things, how do we do that? Well, consider the different skill sets that you may already have. Maybe you've had past jobs. Maybe they've been summer jobs. Maybe they're the things you did in high school, or if you're in graduate school, things you did during undergrad, or things that you're doing, currently or concurrently with what it is that you're doing. And be open to, again, you probably know how I am by now, but different kinds of learning activities, doing different diverse kinds of things. It's very good to be deep into psychology, or into a subset of psychology. That's terrific. I was very deep into clinical and into assessment, but then also to have other opportunities, other learning opportunities, to be able to add other skills to that. Think about what you're doing now, or what maybe you could do in the future that could then distinguish you and add greater value. And even now, you may have, I've had this myself in professional circumstances. My adult children have had this in jobs that they didn't find particularly a good fit, that it's helpful. Actually, you always hope that whatever you're going to get into is going to go well, but you also find that there's certain kinds of things, maybe about a job or certain types of jobs, that you find, gosh, that just was not what I thought it was going to be. And that can help inform you for future opportunities of what to say yes to, or what to take a pass on. And not all of this is academic. Part of it is like the soft skills, like teamwork and navigating workplace cultures, and negotiating workplace co-authorships, and working relationships, and co-editing things, and being on a team, et cetera, being on a grant together, et cetera. Typically for folks as psychologists, that might be kind of second nature, but oftentimes it's things that maybe we do need to work on developing our EQ for some of us, or maybe not, but if that's not if it is an area, take a look at it and think about, what are some of the ways that I could do this? And then, that I just was mentoring a person that's looking to go into medical school. She has an undergrad program at the University of Wisconsin in psychology and biology. She's more interested in psychiatry and medicine rather than psychology. And we were talking kind of about some of the research stuff that she was doing, which she was very deeply into. And I said, how about taking a coding class? How about taking, a data representation class? What about, taking R? That would help distinguish her. It would be helpful in the work that she wants to do. It'd be helpful in the work that she's currently doing. So, think about those other kinds of things. If you're interested in nonprofit areas, then think about maybe taking some classes. They can be online classes about fundraising or marketing for nonprofits or et cetera. So you want to do a startup, then maybe issues around accounting or business development, business 101. So my point is just really try to be comfortable with experimenting and trying out different kinds of things. You don't have to be committed to them. You don't have to be married to them, but just to try them on for size, see what fits, see what works, and those things that work, then try and do more of it. Those things that don't work, good to know that now, prune those back and don't focus so much in those areas. So I'm going to take a sip and take a breath here. The key thing, I think, before you apply to graduate school or to a job, be it post-undergrad or post-grad, is to do your homework. I think really your first job in that process is to do a variety of research. So this can kind of go either which way, if it's a company, if it's for the job, or if it's for university, for graduate school, think about, what that company is, or what about that university, the position, or what the department's like there, who are the leadership folks involved with it. What's the leadership staff like? What's the faculty like? What are if it's a job, or coworkers or students? Take a look at the application form. What are the expectations on it? What's the job description say? Are those kinds of things that are good fits or good enough fits? Maybe, nothing's perfect, but maybe 75% of it, you're spot on. And take a look at the application process. What's that going to be like? Do I need to do a PowerPoint? Do I need to come in and do it one-on-one? Is it all virtual? Do I do it via Zoom? Do I need to submit letters of recommendation? Do I, what does that whole kind of process look like and feel like? And can I start to deconstruct that so it's not quite so overwhelming when I actually start to be able to do those kinds of things? Are there deadlines, et cetera? What's the expectation? And maybe fundamental to answering those questions is to think about why you want to apply there. Is it just ego, honestly? Is it because it's prestigious and that would be cool to have on your resume? Or is it really something that is a great fit for you? It's something that you've always wanted to do for good, solid reasons, not just for vanity kinds of reasons, but why, the work that I've started here as an undergrad, I could really flesh out and do as a graduate student there. The things that I've done this as a trajectory to be able to land me at this company with this position, with this job. So envision what you think your life would be like if you were working there. What would 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours a week be like if you were there? Is it virtual? Is it remote? Is it hybrid? Does it involve travel? Just all the different kinds of things about what that would look like and feel like, and what, would you be excited on Monday morning to, jump out of bed and wake up before the alarm clock goes off? Or would there be a little sense of dread with that? Or how would you manage that? And all of the answers and all the things that comes to mind when you think about that will inform really what comes next. And I think these are, in my opinion, three critical must-do aspects. To be able to get your foot in the door in the first place, you need to apply. Most places will require like a cover letter or a cover email or something. You don't just blindly, send something in that, gets read by an algorithm and hopefully, you've got the right keywords and boom, you get an interview. But one of the key things with this, and whatever, I'm just generically calling it cover letter, is to passively, and I mean this not as like being so overt, but demonstrate that you did your homework. Don't ever do a cut and paste letter ever, be specific to that company or to that university or to that department or to that person, whoever is going to be opening up that application. So for example, if it's a pre-doctoral internship, if you're a graduate student in clinical psychology, or maybe it's a postdoc fellowship after you finished up your graduate degree, or maybe it's a graduate school application if you're an undergrad and you want to go to graduate school, or maybe it's your first position after undergrad and you're going to apply your undergraduate degree rather than go to graduate school, that it's very specific as to why that place is perfect for you and why you're perfect for them. Demonstrate that you're an expert on this. And this is what I mean by passively demonstrating it, that you know the reputation of the site and its leadership. There's ways to be able to communicate that by saying, you know, I've long esteemed that, you know, your place because of, you know, this, that, and the other from its histories and what they've done that's been really great. Or maybe they've had some comebacks. There's been some struggles. There's been some black eyes, and that you're kind of fully aware of that as well too. And it makes you know, kind of a positive difference for you. It's not something negative to cast shade. So, you know, if you're an academic, if it's an academic area, be sure that you let them know that you've read their work. Let's see, if I'm just going to use an example, it's easier with like an internship. See who's the chair of the training program at that internship. See what they've published. See where they went to graduate school. See when they graduated. See where they went to undergrad. Are there any kind of connections with you both went to the same undergraduate university? You both, you have an interest in child and family therapy, and they did their dissertation on child and family therapy. You're going to do your dissertation on child and family therapy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Same kind of thing. Look at their research, look at their grant record, and then comfortably engage with them when you have a conversation, when you do an interview. That, you know, write it out in your cover letter, but have that enthusiasm. They say, talk about like with customer service, have the smile come across in your voice, have your enthusiasm come across in your words by virtue of this letter of what a great fit you would be. Again, not chest pounding. You need to be humble and have some humility with this, but what you would mercenarily gain because it's such a good fit, and then what you could be able to give back in balance with that, to be able to make them want to be looking forward to mentor you and to have you be an intern there or a graduate student there, et cetera. So phase two, let's then presume that that letter did what it was supposed to do. And now you've got the interview. So when you do this interview, be prepared not just to be the interviewee, but also be prepared, I can't talk anymore, to be the interviewer. They're going to ask you, of course, the classic, it's a cliche, you know, at the end, do you have any questions? And it's like, you darn well better. And they better be smart. They better not be, again, cut and paste kinds of questions. You can talk about the mechanics of the position, you know, and stuff like that. I would not lead with that, like how many days vacation do I get, or, you know, can I get a bonus, or, you know, any of these kinds of things. But be prepared. They're going to ask, you know what they're going to ask you. There's umpteen different things. I've got some in my tools too about how to be prepared for being interviewed. So I won't go into those things, but do also be prepared to ask them questions about them. How did you come to, you know, specifically about them too, not just the position. How did you come to be here? How many, you can say, I see that you've worked here for 5 years. What have you seen change in those last 5 years, et cetera? Whatever is a good fit. I can't, you know, prime you with what those questions might be, but I just need to tell you that you need to be very specific with what those questions are going to be to that person, to that position, to whoever else may be in the room interviewing you, or the follow-up interviews, et cetera. I would suggest either on your device or maybe not a device, because it might seem like you're being distracted and you're looking at your Twitter feed or something, but take a notebook. Bring notes of specific things that you have written down, prepared in advance, where you open it up and you point to them. And those can be some of the questions that you're going to be asking them. And then as they give answers to those questions, and as they talk about things that are important to you, take notes, show them that you are paying attention, that you're creating an archive and a document to be able to consider these things and to be able to get your questions answered. And it just, again, it's kind of a meta message of how you comport yourself and how you present yourself, which we'll talk about your brand in just a second. Be comfortable. You're excited to be there. You are darn glad to be there. You're a professional. You're a professional in training. Have good eye contact. Practice with other people if you have, anxiety around these kinds of things. Practice being asked questions. Get a mentor with that. Get your roommate to do that. Practice having eye contact, and come across as you are. You are authentic. You are sincere. It's fine to flatter them. And I'm not worthy moment. People get that. That's nice, but don't go overboard about it. Don't lose all sense with this. But again, be authentic with this. And then step 3. You're not done once the interview's over. You don't just sit back and wait for the acceptance to come your way. Do a follow-up letter. Again, this can be an email. It can be a formal letter. Use your best judgment for the circumstance and situation with this. Some people do both, etc. But in my experience, what I've done after interviews where it's been very successful is that, I've done step 1 and step 2, like I just said to you guys. These come from experience. And then I think about, what did I learn that I could then take, and if I was a consultant for them, that I would make some recommendations. What could I do? Not just, you guys need to do this and you guys need to do that, but things that I could bring to them if I worked for them as a consultant, not just as an employee, or not just as a graduate student, or not just as a student assistant or an intern or a postdoc or whatever. What are some of the things? Because that demonstrates I paid attention. That demonstrates it is a really good fit. That demonstrates that I'm not Pollyanna about this. I'm taking it very seriously, and hopefully you're spot on with whatever those kinds of things would be, of your ideas and your recommendations and your theories and your hypotheses, etc. That you are right. If you aren't, then it's probably not going to be a good fit, and so it goes. Not everything's perfect in terms of mutual fits for every person in every position, and that's fine too. You don't want to be in a position that's going to be bad for you or for them. But also maybe then have as part of that follow-up letter, like a little bit of a highlight reel of how well you thought the interview went. You really enjoyed them giving you the opportunity to talk about that one time in experimental psych class. So you really enjoyed learning about blah, 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 because even in spite of all the in spite of all the research that you did on them, this was a pleasant surprise to learn about this new grant that you just got funding for, that you could be a part of, and would love that opportunity, etc. And then just really your humble appreciation of being considered. Again, they can't accept 20 great people just like you for 2 positions, but so don't expect necessarily that everything's also always going to be a first place, but really that you do appreciate the being considered, because that's good too. People get a lot of Oscar nominations, and not every nominee gets an Academy, so it's also good to be nominated, so to speak. So I'm gonna break in a sip. Think about your personal branding. Jeff Bezos said, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Another way to think about it is just, what's your reputation? How do people think about you? What's the external presentation that people have for you? It's very good to have a strong curriculum vitae or resume, but that actually doesn't tell whoever's checking you out about who you are. It can tell them, maybe what your GPA is, and maybe what you published, et cetera. But, think about how can I say this? Depending upon, your persona, let's say, maybe this is the color commentary versus the score. The score is, what your CV says, what your transcripts say, what your GPA is, how many publications you have, whatever. But then, what's the color commentary that goes along with that? Think about it maybe in the context of who your audience is. So are you in a job right now, or at the point that you will be, and say, well, my audience is really to impress the people that I work with, my boss's boss, because I really want to stay here. I want to get a bonus. I want to have promotion opportunities. I want to get more responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera. Or maybe you're a student and you're thinking, I'm just out of school. I want to get my first gig, or I'm interested in graduate school. So maybe my target audience is universities, or my target audience, if I want to get a gig, is with recruiters and headhunters, et cetera. So those can be different, kinds of things of how you would lean into doing those things. One of the things too to consider is that you already have a brand. You already have an online brand. You already have a public persona. Just be cautious of that. If there's any remnants of any kind of hijinks, high school or undergraduate stuff that may not play well to someone who is naive to you. So lean in more to appropriate and highly visible kinds of things like a presence on LinkedIn. There's a number of students that I've talked with and even graduates that I've talked with that kind of the first place, my go-to is to look and see what they look like on LinkedIn. And oftentimes I'll find no picture there, no background or anything. So I'll talk more about LinkedIn in just a couple of slides, but think about what your online brand is. Hopefully you are on LinkedIn. If not, get on it. We'll talk about some ways to build that out if you are, or if you're going to be soon. What's your Twitter? Think about your handles too. On LinkedIn, you're going to be your name, but on Twitter, sometimes maybe your name was already taken, so you've done something that is trying to be funny or cute or clever or crafty or whatever. It may not play well with all venues and all programs and people and stuff. So think about that. Likewise on Instagram, likewise on Facebook, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Any kind of platform that you're on, how do you look, et cetera. Google yourself. I've done that. There's another guy. There's actually a couple. There's a Chris Stout Hazard. There's a Chris Stout who is a Scottish fiddle player. So there's going to be other people that show up out there, but it's also just sort of interesting to kind of see what shows up, or maybe there's some specific things that you can do. Like if I put in my middle initial E, then it really filters down to me and not these other Chris Stouts, and then see what's out there, and that's interesting, now that I've got a podcast and publications and a variety of things, there's a variety of things that show up, but it's also kind of interesting, what shows up first. Is this what I expected or not? And sometimes there's not a whole lot you can do about that. If there are things that come up that's kind of like, then, take a look and maybe, take down your Twitter and create a new one, or, do some housekeeping and house cleaning with some of the stuff that you're out there. When I research somebody for my podcast, it is amazing to me how far back some things go, what shows up, et cetera. So really, trust me, it is kind of this archaeological archive of good and bad behavior for all of us. But, do take a look so that you're aware of it. Other people may be doing it to Google you to see if you're a good fit, or, we're at the last, we've got it narrowed down to two candidates, and they look you up and they see, great stuff online, and they look the other person up and they see not so great stuff. Then that could be a tipping point. It certainly can be a factor in some situations. The key thing is don't have it be a weakness for you. And these are fixable kinds of things. So just, use common sense and demonstrate that you have that kind of awareness, which is a good meta message when people are kind of checking you out. You also have an in-person brand. When you're doing that Zoom presentation or interview or face-to-face kind of thing, or visiting the campus or whatever it might be, how do you present physically? Are you, does it look like you just kind of rolled out of bed, you have your hood up on your hoodie, et cetera? How articulate are you? How do you spontaneously maintain small talk and stuff just before the interview, or, it's something's going on? Can you maintain eye contact with people? Are you always compelled to look at your device instead, or twiddle your thumbs? So think about how, when someone is with you, you make them feel. Do you make them feel uncomfortable? Do you make them feel at ease, et cetera? So those are different kinds of things that you can, some things you can check out for yourself, and some things you need to maybe get some feedback on. So the takeaways are, think about, how am I seen by other people? How do I think I'm seen by other people? How do I want to be seen by other people? How can I tweak this, project this, et cetera? Are there some things that I'm not doing that I probably could? So, just with a trusted friend or parent or professor or colleague or whoever, ask them, what are a couple of words that you might use to describe me as a professional? And then they'll tell you, and hopefully those are good things. And then you'll say, what makes you say that? What is it that I do that does that. Or maybe you have a couple of things and it never comes up with anybody. Share those and then ask them, what is it that I'm doing that makes it seem like I'm disorganized? Because I think I'm really well organized, but no one ever says that I'm organized. So, think about those kinds of things. There may be lots of stuff that you do that just happens that's not visible to the public. So some of those things would be considerations that you might want to make more visible. So let's shift in. I've done a lot of teeing up for LinkedIn. They're not commercially sponsoring this talk, but I'm very involved with LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn influencer and have been quite involved with them in a variety of ways for a number of years. Some data on this. Just recently, I saw a study. It's in the link. The full article is in the notes. That new hires made through LinkedIn have doubled in the last quarter of 2021. Very recent data for the time of this talk. People who included a summary, which you'll see that's like the about, receive up to 3.9 times as many profile views as folks that don't. Some tips with this is that employers, if you're a recent graduate, employers don't expect you to have like a boatload of experience or a boatload of connections. You're probably young. You're just kind of getting out there and getting started. If you're my age, people expect that that's out there. So that's a different problem. But here's some ways to stand out. Really, honestly, this is so simple and it's so absent in a lot of people that I've mentored, is to have both a profile photo and a background photo. I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. The data on this is that it's one of the most important things that you can do on LinkedIn. Having a photo makes your profile 21 times more likely to be viewed. And part of that's, the whole, evolutionary evolutional psychology aspect of faces versus words and things like that. But like, here's mine. So there's my face, my mugshot there, that's fine. Make sure it's a nice one. Make sure it's, if you can get it professionally done, if you probably haven't had since you've been in high school and getting your class pictures taken. But, these are easy enough to do with someone with a nice camera and just, you can make a JPEG out of it and all is fine. Again, be cautious with it. I see some goofy ones. I see some poorly lit ones. I see some that the person, it's like a full body one, so they look super teeny. So, just something along these lines. And then the background was just, this is me, but I just wanted something kind of eye-catching and kind of engaging. I do a lot of artsy, what I would call my attempts at artsy shots to use for LinkedIn influencer posts. So again, it's kind of maybe a little abstract, a little unclear, hopefully a little engaging. And this is actually kind of a 4-portrait set of photos taken, I think it's on Wells Avenue in Chicago. And I took this, it's like a picture of a picture. This was hanging on a wall in a hotel. So I took a picture of it and I liked how it looked. I felt like it worked. I've done similar kinds of things with different kinds of pictures in other places. And then this is the about section that we were talking about. And if you look just below my name too, these are all things that you get to choose yourself. You can edit them, you can change them, what have you. But these are all searchable, not only within LinkedIn, but within, Google and other search engines. So just make sure that the kinds of stuff that you want to have pinged are in these areas because they are highly, highly searchable. So with those, thinking about them as keywords. And then also in that about section, right, again, I think there is a finite limit. I think there's a character count for that. But think about, 5 to 7 sentences that tell a potential employer or internship site or whatever it might be, who you are. And this isn't bullets of resume that I have a 3.9 out of 4 GPA. I got this score on my GREs or my MCATs or whatever. Not so much the resume talk, but more so maybe a little bit of personal stuff, like character stuff, not self-disclosing in the sense of some weird thing that happened to you, but more so that you've worked with flying doctors for 3 missions in 3 different countries, that you were maybe something that might be, if it's whatever's relevant, vis-a-vis, don't just give kind of a hit list of a highlight reel of cool stuff that you've done, but how it's relevant for you as a potential graduate student, employee, intern, etc., at whatever it is, whoever it is, back to that audience point, is going to be reading this. Post-COVID or during COVID, LinkedIn also created the open to work circle. So when you've got your great headshot in there, you can also click in and have the open to work, hashtag open to work, be part of it. When you do that, people that do that are 40% more likely to receive messages from recruiters, because it's just sort of a public way to say, hey, I'm graduated, or hey, I'm in between positions, or whatever, looking for a new opportunity, etc. So keep that in mind. If it's a good fit for you, that's an easy way to boost your email and connections from recruiters that take a look at you and kind of see what's what. They're filtering, they're looking, they're searching, they want to be able to make connections for people. And then take a look at what I call meaningful connections. There's so many groups. It's a little Facebook-esque in a sense, I suppose, but about different groups on LinkedIn. There's a variety of different kinds of areas depending upon interests and expertise and career and whatnot. There's a variety in psychology, in economics, marketing, kind of you name it. Anything that's a thing is probably got a network of people that are interested in it. But this is obviously more so professional kinds of things, not hobbyists or whatever, like you might see on Facebook. So you can also then look at the alumni network. This is kind of what I call my pro tip, to be corny about it. So go to your university's LinkedIn page. So here, I've done it for you. This is IUPUI alumni. Obviously there is one. And then you can, I'm not doing the rest of this, but you can search for alumni by title or keyword or company. Alumni from IUPUI that are now at Eli Lilly or at Harvard Medical School, or whatever else it might be that you have an interest in or that you want to be involved with or whatever, and it quickly spools down and filters for you contacts that you have something in common with, because you're both alumni, and maybe and something potentially in common with because that person works at the place that you would love to be able to get a gig at, or that you've got an application in, or maybe you're considering an application. You kind of want to do a little due diligence in advance before you go to the effort of submitting all the great material about yourself. Be personal when you do these kinds of things. So when you send a message to an alumni who maybe doesn't know you, but respects the fact of kind of what it is, make it a personal note. Be specific about why you're writing. You're not just trying to build up your network or something like that. If you're not, and you'll see, you can start to track these people, not stalky-ish, but you can kind of see what's what. Maybe you don't have something specific to ask them, or pardon me, to say to them, or a personal message, but ask them a question. See that they just recently liked something or posted on something, or maybe they wrote something themselves. Maybe they're an influencer and they posted something. Ask them a question and engage with them that way. That's kind of, LinkedIn really loves interaction between people. So asking questions and things like that's very helpful. I'll tell you though, on the flip side of it, it's very tough. I post with a fairly frequent cadence on LinkedIn, and you do want engagement, so to speak, and interaction and stuff, but there's just sort of like no way. I have a LinkedIn newsletter that I post monthly, and man, I cannot keep up with all the comments and questions and things like that. I tried, and that becomes almost a part-time job trying to do that. So don't get mad. Don't get crestfallen if someone doesn't immediately respond to you or ever to those kinds of things. They're not ghosting you. They're not ignoring you. It's just, I don't see them all. I mean, I can't even keep up. I have to go out and see these things. I don't always get notifications. So don't worry about that. But, nevertheless, experiment with it, try it, et cetera. And, who knows, it may lead to some, good kinds of connections and things like that. And then if you do connect on LinkedIn, there's what they call InMail. You may be familiar with it. That's great. A recruiter, an employer, et cetera, may ping you via InMail. Set up all your notifications so when that happens, you get a notice on your phone or a notice in your email, et cetera, because it's easy, unless you go onto LinkedIn every day and check those things. I like the push notifications rather than me having to go search for things. But you also may want to you can put this kind of right, and it doesn't display on your first page, but it's like contact info, and you can put as much or as little information in that as you want. I have my email address, my personal email address, in my contact info. So you can do that. You can make it a university address, or whatever address, or no address if you don't want to, but I would recommend personal email so that you're not just dependent upon LinkedIn's InMail. And try not to be funny. Leave that to us professionals here. Humor online is very difficult. Humor verbally is also pretty difficult as well too. So It's hard to kind of have that, the proverbial get it, this is you get the pun, you get the reference, etc. Don't expect people to do that, and it just can kind of, backfire. So just don't even attempt. Just use humor with caution in any kind of circumstance, but this isn't a good venue for it. And then whatever you already have up, have someone take a look, or if you're getting ready to put up maybe new content or create your LinkedIn site for the first time, get feedback. Like I said earlier, from a parent, from a trusted professional, from someone else that's on LinkedIn or been on it for a while, or familiar with kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then you can always tweak it. It's not set in stone. You can edit it, every afternoon if you want to, whatever to do with it. So it's dynamic. It's not locked in and frozen. So make sure that you're doing what it is that you want to have happen. Some tips. I'm going to shift out of LinkedIn and kind of go to the more general kinds of things. Obviously, have a strong resume or vita. If you want to be able to see what some of those kinds of things look like, and some tips for that compelling cover letter that I talked about, that non-cut and paste cover letter. What do they look like? This is a great resource for not only jobs, but also these kinds of tools. They also recommend Craig also recommends, he's got in that same book that we just saw in that past slide, you can follow different kinds of career sources on Twitter. I am the least comfortable, conversational, knowledgeable about how Twitter works. I am super Twitter naive. I am on Twitter, but and I post things secondarily to Twitter based upon other kinds of links, like from LinkedIn. But there are other kinds of areas to look in this. And if Twitter's maybe your power social media platform, take a look at it, and that you can get a variety of different kinds of tips and help from there as well too, vis-a-vis career. So go to Google, look at some websites and job lists. There are tons and tons out there, from jobs to undergraduate internships to graduate, pre-doc internships, etc. So take a look in that, or whatever, for psychology or related fields that you have interests in. Use your own contacts and your own networks, maybe from places that you've been, projects that you've been on, grants, etc. Professors, colleagues, the alumni stuff through LinkedIn and elsewhere. So take a look at your social networks and see where you can maybe start to cultivate what you already have had planted. And then look at new networks, depending upon what you're interested in. This is just kind of a sampler from advocacy areas, like conflict resolution, or women and international security, or justice and peace issues, etc. There are a ton of things out there. And again, in general, if you're a student, not yet graduated, or maybe a new grad, a lot of the memberships to these and whatnots, maybe they're always free, but a lot of times as a student or whatever, there's deep discounts in memberships, or maybe there's free memberships. I recommend doing that. It's a good investment if it's inexpensive and affordable to you. Because it's never going to be any cheaper. And then it also gives you an opportunity to try it on and see if it's a good fit, that then once you're a functioning professional and you can pay full freight for your dues, then versus having to do that, or learning again, oh, this is not a good fit. I'm glad I didn't pay more than $10 to be a student member, and I'm not going to renew next year, kind of a thing. So also look for fellowships. My experience, generally fellowships are postdoctoral fellowships, but there's a variety of different kinds of ones out there. Fulbrights are amazing. We'll talk about Ashoka in just a second. And then look at a lot of organizations, especially nowadays, I see more and more of them, of mentoring programs for new employees. My daughter went from undergrad to a national company with a 2-year mentoring program, and then completing that 2-year program, there's rotations within that program, then kind of tees you up to have a for sure job after you've finished that program. But there's a variety of, there's like the UN, for example, has a junior program officers positions. There's entry level fellowships in a variety of different kinds of areas for just people with undergraduate degrees, like Catholic Relief, etc. So again, get a cup of coffee, go to Google and start searching, kind of see what's out there. I mentioned Ashoka. I'm a big fan of Ashoka. It's just Bill Drayton is just amazing. He should win a Nobel Prize as far as my opinion is worth. But they're very much into social entrepreneurship. They have fellowships. They're in 70 countries, probably more by now. They have a change makers program. I mean, just, do take a look at it. They are really, talk about, like walking the talk. They really do amazing stuff, amazing people, highly respected, just terrific. So if this is an area that you have an interest in, this is probably a good place to take a look at. And I can't help but have a slide that doesn't have the word LinkedIn in it, but they also LinkedIn, if you care to just specifically look in nonprofits, you can do job searches and filter it down just to the working in positions that are in the nonprofit arena. Take a breath. So if I could use the School of Science time machine and go back a few decades and pull a Marty McFly and give myself some advice, I thought I might kind of take the liberty as we wind down to talk about those things and kind of build those out and kind of say what's what. I'd say, be disciplined, but but maybe not too much. I certainly have the discipline down, but I see a little bit of a backlash and a backfire of that is that it probably stimulated a lot of anxiety and a lot of over focusing, OCD-ish kinds of things that I probably could have dialed back a bit. And I think I still probably would have done fine, but probably would have had a little better sleep and fewer ulcers in the process of it. So if you're not undisciplined, then be disciplined, but certainly moderate, how much is the right dose, so to speak. If you're shy, that's unfortunate and too bad. You need to get it out there anyway. When I was 22, I was shy. I am still shy to this day. I was very much a wallflower back then, a little bit less now, but I still feel old Mr. Anxiety making my intestines queasy a lot of times if I am at a conference that I attend, or even if I'm not presenting, just attending, if I'm going to some kind of meet and greet where I don't know anyone, I go anyway. And the story is the same. I feel nervous about it. I'm conflicted about it. I think, oh, maybe I really don't need to go. And then once I get there, I learn some new things. I'm engaged by the conference and the topics. I meet some interesting people, and I make it back home unscathed and probably made some new friends that I want to follow up with. And, I just kind of wish back at 22, I would have known that and told myself that sooner. It's not all going to be rainbows and unicorns and butterflies. There will be some tough times. I was married and got divorced during graduate school, lived very poverty-stricken, drove around in a $500 pickup truck, and, it was crappy, but you kind of make it through it. And, there will always be these kinds of things. So just expect that that's all part of it. And that's all part of life from graduate school, undergraduate, whatnot. Get a mentor. If I would have gone into farming, my dad would have been a great mentor, my uncle as well, my grandfather as well. If I wanted to hack being a great single mom, my mom would have been probably the top of my list. There's really no one that did it much better than what mine did. But depending upon what you're interested in, getting a mentor could be tricky. People are busy. People are involved in a variety of things. They may or may not know you, maybe they do know you through a class or whatever, or sometimes maybe they don't know you from Adam, as they say. So while it's great to have, like a real human being, one-on-one conversation, mentor kind of thing, it doesn't have to be lifelong. It doesn't have to be, it could be very short and specific and very focused. And you can also kind of think about kind of virtual mentor, so to speak. Like I oftentimes, I'm obviously a big podcast fiend, and I like Peter Attia, I like Rich Roll, I like Tim Ferriss as podcasters. And I sort of sometimes find myself as saying, well, okay, how would Tim Ferriss handle this? What would Peter Attia think about that? And so I use them in my head of what I know of them by virtue of the conversations of thousands of hours I've listened to about how they perceive the world and how they act within it. You can do the same thing with other kinds of figureheads, so to speak. I was a big fan of Richard Saltwerman with the TED conferences. I was a big fan of R. Buckminster Fuller and all the work that he did and the writings he did. I read both of those guys' works. And I didn't get to meet Buckminster Fuller face to face, but I corresponded with him and he wrote me back in 1979. I got to meet Richard at the TED conferences, and he invited me out to his house when we worked on that Understanding USA. So they can be virtual, they can be real, they can be short term, et cetera. But just think about, getting who a mentor might be, why you might want them, and go about seeing if you can kind of make it happen. While mentors are great, keep your friends close too. Don't get wrapped up too much in your work or your studies or yourself. While mentors are good and helpful and necessary, don't forget your peers, your colleagues. They'll support you very specifically and more frequently. They'll give you reality checks and they'll give you ideas. And just they can be mentors too. You just probably might hear them differently and take what they have to say with less of a grain of salt and more to heart. Friends are also great to have and to be thankful for as well too. Have a direction, but it doesn't need to be the perfect right one. And obviously, coming from me, it doesn't have to be the only one. I think it's fine to take the scenic route every so often, or go off-road, or follow detours, or if you find a better direction or a more direct route or something, if that fits, then then take that one. Personally, when I started graduate school, I fantasized that I would be seeing adult outpatients. And when I finished graduate school, my first positions were child inpatients, about as opposite as it could be. And that was great. That was fine. I could not have predicted at age 22 that I would be doing the things that I am doing today, 40 years later. So it's good to be able to do that. And again, like my little journey metaphor, that's been great to be able to do that and meet a variety of different and interesting people and do some interesting things. Probably, I mean, again, it's been kind of a Gaussian curve or something. I did a lot of stuff for maybe the reverse of it. Did a lot of stuff for free when I was an undergrad and graduate student because no one would pay you to do any of these kinds of things. But I also, just enjoy those things. And I still do that today. So, just still do those at any point in time in your career. They'll benefit you. Don't put things off. Obviously, be opportunistic in a positive way, but I used to call it the pox of the untills of, I'm going to wait until I graduate. I'm going to wait until this, I'm going to wait until that. Some things you sort of have to, I have to wait until I get my license to start my practice, but not everything has to be put off. And sometimes it's more so for not good reasons. Claim ownership rights, be a craftsperson, practice your skills, refine things. You won't be perfect at the start, but take pride and take ownership in what it is that you do. And every so often, just, lose yourself, get caught up on a run, get caught up in, crafting a great, sentence, et cetera. Just lose yourself in the work that you're doing. And really now is the time to mess up. Maybe one last test is that if you doubt your work, you're probably doing it right, that you care about it, that it's important to you. So I'm going to end up with just some caveats and some reminders. Do keep in mind that my experiences are from a while back. A lot of those things have changed and are different than what they were in 1981 versus for the class of 2022. I also, so some things may be quite generalizable, some things may not. Keep in mind who I am. I'm an allied, privileged, straight white male. So there may be limitations of my experiences than to that of others. Also that, I'm, sorry about that. I found in doing studies that women's career development differs from men's, and lesbian women and other minority status groups differ still from that. So the importance is to establish competence in the areas that we work, to maintain continual assessment that what you're doing is appropriate and that you have the appropriate professional knowledge and skills over your career and your lifespan. And as psychologists of any ilk, we are always philosophically guided by and our actions informed by psychology's ethical principles. So keep that in mind. Global psych, local psych, clinical psych, anything. Our ethical principles are really kind of what keeps us on track and keeps everything, proper. So to recap, just to say there is really no fixed set of rules, no set path that you have to follow. Everything that I've talked about here are guidelines, are things to think about and to consider. So it's really a lot about tools. In this slide you see on issue, I have a copy of this PowerPoint. I also have all the notes from this, and then a copy of this will be on my YouTube channel for the live version, so to speak, that you've heard today. I'm a real fan about tools. These are also other areas on my websites and an issue of things that you can take a look at and click on and go to and learn more. So on the live version of this, we'll have time for questions and answers. You can certainly, if you're listening to this, you can email me with questions if you'd like, and hopefully I'll be able to give you some cogent answers. So really, thanks again for tuning into this and to IUPUI's School of Science, Department of Psychology for having me. Do keep in touch. Here's my personal email address, and I'd like you to go do great things. Thanks.